Behold, a quick little video in which I show you my first impressions of all of the new weapons that we got in the Deadlock Protocol, and there are quite a few of them. This is going to cover the new Kitguns, well, the primary versions of the Kitguns that we had. They are functionally different, just in subtle ways, and then the new weapons that came with Protea, and also a new Sentinel Weapon. Obviously, I've had very little time to play with these, but I'll tell you what I know and how I plan to build them. Starting with the Corpus Gun Blade, so this is the Stropha. This fires a short-range blast, and by short-range I mean it has a finite travel time. This is basically like firing an Archiplasmor or Ketchmoon shot, as I can gather. So when you shoot it, it just travels a defined range and then stops. You can't shoot things from far away. It's not shooting bullets or pellets. It fires for a certain range, and then it does not fire anymore. Let's find out how far away that is. Like 15, 20 meters. Anyway, not short, but a medium-ish range. The damage is pretty good, the crit is really good, and the status is not great. So the obvious way to build this would be as a heavy attack weapon. You're going to be using it at close range, so there aren't going to be infinite enemies near you at close range. So the straightforward way I would think to build this is for heavy attacks, and then Redeemer Prime might make more sense as a combo building weapon. They're both probably going to be fine both ways. This is the beginning of a heavy attack build I would use. I've got a whole series of videos on heavy attacks. It seems pretty solid. It feels good. The stats are all around pretty solid except the status chance. This kind of weapon, I don't think it's the hugest deal, and if you wanted to use it as a combo weapon, you sure could. So pretty solid. And does seem to get impact basically every shot, which is also very good. The Staudte, this is a 2-fire mode weapon. The first firing mode is auto. It's got pretty low fire rate for an auto weapon. However, the base damage is quite solid. That amount of fire rate to base damage is not amazing, but not bad at all. It's got good status, not amazing crit multiplier, but the crit chance is good. So overall, this is maybe a little unexciting, but not bad auto weapon. It's notable for being a bit slower than similar competition, but otherwise having pretty favorable damage ratios. The way I've been enjoying using it so far, however, is this charge shot. So this uses 20 rounds in the magazine. It's only got 40, but this weapon's reload is quite quick. You're going to charge up, you hit the button, and you charge up, and then you fire this thing, which has a slight delay and then explodes. It's got innate radiation, and it explodes in a pretty big radius for a lot of damage. You keep in mind this is on its first time leveling up with no forma. It's pretty solid. Again, innate radiation, and then it's got that explosion. The status chance is pretty okay for a weapon like this. I don't know if I'd rely on that since it's only a couple of hits. But it's pretty good. The crit chance also goes up to exactly 100% with Point Strike when using the charge mode. The crit multiplier also goes up. So this will do quite a bit better as I put more investment into it. The damage is quite high as well. You'll see it's not insane or anything, but with a 3x crit multiplier, 600 base damage is pretty solid. And then there's more on that. That's just the direct hit, and then the explosion is 1200. Very, very good explosive weapon. You have to reload it every 2 shots, but with those 2 shots, everything that you're shooting it at should be pretty much dead. And as you can see, the reload is quite fast for a weapon like this. The Velux is an auto pistol. It's got pretty whatever stats for an auto pistol. The damage is nothing to write home about. The crit is pretty bad. That multiplier kind of hurts. It's not so bad you can't use it. The status is good, but these weapons always have good status output. The magazine seems fine, but the reload is pretty nasty. However, when used by Protea, this is her signature weapon, it says ammo efficiency is increased. Further increased, this is not an ammo efficient weapon. What that means is that when Protea is using it, it only uses half a bullet per shot. You should think of this as doubling the magazine, but what actually happens is that I pull the trigger, it doesn't use a bullet, and then I pull it again, and it does. It doesn't, it does. It doesn't, it does. I mean, I can't shoot only 1 shot at a time, but anyway, you'll take my word for it, it uses half a bullet each time. With Protea using it, the magazine is quite suitable for this amount of fire rate. This is, again, it's not a remarkable amount of damage for a weapon with this fire rate, but it's still good, and the fact that the magazine is rather large compared to weapons in competition with it makes it pretty solid when used by Protea, or if you're bypassing the reload. I think this one is not great if you don't like long reloads, you don't like bypassing reloads, or you don't like Protea. Hey, Future Zandy here from 2 days later to talk to you about this little upcoming section about Kitguns. So I'm going to recommend some various Kitguns with various builds, and it's only been 2 days and I've already changed all of them. I'm not using, well, maybe the Rattleguts, but I'm not using most of the Kitguns that I'm going to show you. That's not because their builds don't make any sense, it's just because I wanted to play around with them more and decide the parts I wanted, which is exactly what I recommend that you do. I don't think you should ever just copy the parts for a Kitgun or a Zaw, for example. And the reason is because there really isn't a single optimal build. As long as they're built sensibly, the crit and the status and the fire rate and the damage are relatively evenly traded off. Those things are not all equal, but as long as you build it in a way that makes sense and has some thought behind it, you are getting close to the highest, like, technical maximum damage, whatever, and that doesn't matter. You should build something that has the usability and the behavior that you enjoy, that you're going to use. So I just wanted to say that my general recommendation for Kitguns is that you should split the crit and status evenly. You always want both unless there's some reason you can't have both in this meta. And if the weapon has very, very fast fire rate, then maybe you go a little bit more crit. You drop a little bit of status. Or you could still go even. There are a lot of weapons have both stat spreads and are really good. I don't think you want to go too much lower with the crit. It can lead to some wonky consistency, especially with 100 munitions if you decide to use that on weapons like this. So you'll notice that, for example, this one is evenly split, and this one, which is not gilded, but you'll notice is way more crit than status because the fire rate is extremely high. You could also evenly split it. I would not recommend going less crit and more status, despite the importance of status in this meta. Within that, like, you do whatever parts you want, but that's my guideline. More on Kitguns like this one in the future. On to the Kitguns. So I mentioned earlier that these fire a little differently than their normal counterparts. The least different one is Rattleguts, so let's get that out of the way. Remember, these aren't format or anything. The stats are mostly the same as the normal versions. I'll mention some exceptions. So here's Rattleguts, and as you can see, it's pretty similar. The recoil is low, the accuracy is average, the damage is average, the reload's fine, the magazine size is fine. The big thing here is that for a primary weapon, this is pretty good fire rate. This is among the higher fire rates among primary weapons. If this was a secondary weapon, well, it is a secondary weapon when it is a secondary weapon. The fire rate is nothing to write home about. It's pretty average. This is, I think it is higher fire rate than the secondary version, and for a primary, that's pretty high. Don't know how much I feel that matters, but it's pretty high. Because it is a Kitgun, you can skew the stats toward crit rather than status. Remember, these are ungilded, so they'll be higher when you actually build it yourself, and that's pretty good. Again, the damage, while this is ungilded, I've checked the gilded version, is sort of nothing to write home about overall, but the weapon does have remarkable fire rate, and it's not like it's going to be a bad weapon, keeping in mind that it can also equip Kitgun arcanes. Probably the next least different weapon is Ketchmoon as a primary weapon. So the big difference here is that it's auto. The damage is lower and the fire rate is higher, and it's an automatic weapon. So you'll see that I can just fire it auto. The recoil is pretty low, the accuracy is pretty good, and then you have to reload it very often because the magazine is still small. I think the magazine is just about the same, maybe only a little higher than the secondary version. And again, keep in mind, this is not gilded, this isn't modded or anything, so I'm not showing you damage, I'm just showing you the firing mechanics. That being said, the damage per shot is what you would expect. I mean, it's Ketchmoon, but an auto weapon, so the fire rate is faster, you're gonna have to reload it a lot. If you look at the fire rate to damage ratio on this weapon, it's quite good, except that you need to reload it every second or so. So other weapons, that's not as good. Their burst DPS is not as good, but their sustained damage is quite a bit better. So this is probably going to be a standout burst damage weapon overall. It's really good for spraying. I mean, a lot of people already use Ketchmoon like this. I certainly did. And it's good for that, but I don't think it's absolutely outstanding. Again, keeping in mind that it can also use Kitgun arcanes. Tombfinger and Gaze basically have totally different behavior. Tombfinger is the one that I think is the worst as a secondary Kitgun, so I'm happy to say that as a primary Kitgun, it's a little bit different. Yeah, so it's basically the Staudte with the secondary fire. You just have to charge it manually, and then it fires an explosive that explodes. It's basically a straightforward energy rocket launcher. That being said, the explosion radius is rather large. You saw those enemies got touched by the very edge, remembering that explosive damage has a fall-off range now, so you don't take as much damage on the edge. It's pretty solid. The damage radius is good. The damage increases when you charge it, so it's a lot more damage when it's charged up. This weapon never had a problem with not doing enough damage. It was just how it delivered the damage. So long as the damage is good as well, which I expect it will be, on the charge shots, this should be pretty strong. Again, there's a good amount of competition for explosive primary, so in that way, like if this was what the secondary did, I think that would be a very, very popular weapon. As a primary, I'm not so sure. It's a little weird that we have a weapon, the primary I showed you before, the non-Kitgun primary, that does almost the same thing that came out in this update. That being said, it's pretty good. Finally, gaze. This one is kind of weird. So it's very different behavior. Normal gaze, secondary gaze, I should say, has a chaining mechanic. It's a beam with chaining. This one is this. So what's happening here is that it fires out to an end location, and then it's a little mini mirage prism, I think is what we're looking at right now. How does it work? So if enemies are in the radius, they take damage. So you see when it goes like that, that means it's locked onto someone and is hurting them. It goes up here and it stops making sparks. That means it isn't hurting them. You see that difference? So that's how it works. You don't have to hit something with the center to make it have an AoE. So this isn't like you fire at the laser and then when it hits something, it has that AoE. It has the AoE at the end if it doesn't hit something first. And so you can still hurt enemies with it, even if you just shoot in between them, they'll still take damage, but only at the end or at the... It looks to me sort of like it will stop early, or perhaps not. Anyway, that behavior is a little odd, like the way it locks onto enemies, but basically, it's a beam weapon that has a large AoE at the end. This might seem really unique. It's actually very similar to Glaxian Vandal. It's just that the AoE that does damage at the end is much larger than Glaxian Vandal. Another thing I noticed is that whether it's because of being a primary or just the lack of lethal torrent or whatever, one problem with Gaze has always been how the magazine was very small, and then the reload would be kind of long given that magazine amount. And this weapon, for some reason, I don't entirely understand why, maybe it's the lack of fire rate, any number of factors, but that feels way better. Like there's no problem with the magazine at all. I had cautiously built this with a really big magazine. I'm probably going to swap it out because it's totally unnecessary. Finally, we come to the new Sentinel Weapon, the new robotics weapon that came with the new MOA. As with the other weapons that, quote, come with new MOAs, you have to buy this separately from legs. It doesn't come with the MOA. You don't have to build the MOA to get it. It's called the Hellstrom. That's pretty weird. The stats are pretty weird. So low crit chance, very low fire rate. The magazine is huge. The status is 30%, and it's a burst fire weapon. It's got some damage. This is atrocious damage for this fire rate, so basically nothing damage. And then it's got an explosion radius that has innate heat on it. Ooh. This is a status missile launcher. I'm just going to show you what it looks like when it's shooting, and then I'll explain it a bit more. So when it gets near enemies, it fires out this cluster of missiles. It works with multi-shot, as you can see. It looks to be a 2 or 3 round burst. It doesn't really matter. The result is that it does an absolutely insane amount of status. The missiles fly slowly and they explode in a little radius. Remember that the damage is basically nothing, but it sort of doesn't matter because this weapon is all about status. A very good kind of weapon to have an explosive radius on. So what's going on here is that I have modded some electricity onto it, and because it has a damage, direct damage, and a radial attack that has innate heat, you can put just one element on it and you're getting 2 more different types of status. These will be viral. You've noticed I've put no damage on it at all. If you compare its damage to something like Death Machine Rifle, this has, I'm not exaggerating, like 10 or 20 times less damage. It is meaningless damage. Like Death Machine Rifle, pulling out all the stops, already barely does meaningful damage. Do not even bother trying to get this to do good damage. It doesn't. It just does not do good damage. Put a lot of fire rate on it, put some multi-shot on it, and then I'm going to recommend electricity and then viral. So you'll have impact, puncture, electricity, and then viral, impact, and radiation, because the electricity will combine in. That's pretty good. There might be other combinations that make more sense. I think this is the most straightforward one, given the amount of space. If you were going to get a Riven, I would recommend going... I mean, I don't know if I would recommend a Riven for this weapon, but if you were going to go for one, honestly, I probably will. Then I would recommend considering getting fire rate, multi-shot, and status chance. I think this is pretty good overall. When do you use this weapon? Well, the closest thing that we have as a Sentinel weapon is the Cryatra, a weapon that does nothing damage, but is just a status laser. I think the differences are that the Cryatra gives you the status a lot more up front, but it doesn't give you as many statuses. It doesn't have IPS. For condition overload, this is usually a lot better, because you get like 4 with one shot. It delivers them more slowly, especially at range, although I do think the missiles have homing. It kind of looks like they'll curve around. Don't put punch through on this, by the way, because they'll just go through enemies and you won't get that explosion, which is where half the status comes from. So overall, it's pretty interesting. I think it's good. I think it is more of what a lot of people want from their Sentinel weapon, which is for it to be utility focused. This is definitely utility focused. This is absolutely atrocious for damage. But that being said, it is a little weird. I do think that the slow firing missiles mean that if you're moving around a lot, your Sentinel's going to have a lot of trouble using this. Something I'm foreseeing being a problem, for example, is that while you're moving quickly and enemies are like over there, your Sentinel might fire them so slowly, or they move so slowly, that despite homing, they're just going to hit a wall and not get to their target, which is not going to do you much good. It may also be more effective to run more status, disabling focused status effects. Rather than using things that actually make the enemies weaker. I think radiation is really good, but it might be that literally just heat is more useful. I don't know, it will require some testing. The last thing I wanted to mention is that since it has in particular impact damage, this will make it much easier to do Parazon finishers, since a full stack of impact nearly guarantees a Parazon finisher after the changes. So it's a small niche, but it's a niche. Hey you. There's one other weapon in this update. You get it from the quest, so you might consider that a spoiler. If you do, then you should skip to the end of the video. This is right at the end of the video. There's nothing else in this video, but here it is. I'm going to show you the weapon. It's a glaive. It's a really weird glaive. As you can see, it's this sort of energy disc. It's called the Zorus, and it has infinite combo duration. So I don't have a lot to say about this one, but I thought I'd mention it. I do think infinite combo duration is good because it sort of represents another mod slot. It means that you can make a combo-based build. You can make a build with Blood Rush and Condition Overload and Weeping Wounds if you so choose, and etc., and you don't need to use a combo duration mod for usability. You arguably do not need to use a combo duration mod anyway, but if you're going to play in a normal mission, you will certainly have times where you're not fighting enemies for 10 to 15 seconds at a time. That would normally reset your combo. With this weapon, it doesn't. However, you can always use Naramon to just make your combo go forever. I don't have a lot else to say about this one, but the stats are pretty solid. The crit is fine. The crit multiplier is pretty good. The speed is good. The damage is low, but these are good stats overall, and remember that you will gain some damage from the combo duration being infinite, because the mod slot that you would have used for combo duration will be damage instead. For combo-based builds, there are plenty of mods for that 8th slot that do meaningfully increase your damage, so that does recoup the cost somewhat. However, this weapon's range is 1.3, so the mod that you're going to use in the slot that you would have put combo duration in is Primed Reach, and this weapon is still pretty short, so that's the end of that. Yeah, but put your Sugatras on it, because they dangle in the middle. I don't know why this is so funny to me, but I couldn't stop laughing about this on stream. Thanks for watching. I hope this helped you and excited you as much as it excited me when I saw all of these new weapons. I'm looking forward to playing with this Gunblade especially. I'm really interested to see how the Hellstrom actually feels in gameplay, as I've only gotten to play with it for about a half hour in like actual gameplay. I'm looking forward to these Kitguns. It's going to take a while to guild them all, but we'll talk about them more once they're done. If you want that information sooner, stick around on my stream, because that's where that's going to go up. I'm very unlikely to make individual videos about each of the Kitguns or each of these weapons when they're fully developed. I just wanted to give you a little bit of a teaser, since there's a lot of new exciting weapons, and they're pretty much all good. I feel like the only thing that I don't generally immediately recommend is the Velux, but with Protea it's pretty good. I mean, the magazine, the ammo efficiency thing, makes it pretty solid with her. And again, if you're bypassing the reload, it's still quite solid. It's not amazing, but it's definitely pretty good. I prefer it to most of the other automatic secondaries. So anyway, thanks for watching, and I'll see y'all on the other side.
We carry their war across starry waters, though broken and sore. We die on our feet, we cut through the heavens like thunder and lightning. We brighten the storms that trouble the seas. We carry their war across starry waters, though broken